Okay, well, while we wait for the last few people to arrive, let me give you just a few words of welcome from Weave a Real Peace, and that's the organization that's sponsoring our meeting today, our webinar. And Kelsey, do you think I could share my screen? Is that going to be possible? Yeah, let's try it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm just taking you very quickly to the website for weavearealpeace.org. Some of you are very familiar with it, but this is the purpose of our organization to be a catalyst to improve the quality of life of textile artisans worldwide. So this is a global network. Definitely so happy to have you be part of it. All of our past presentations have been recorded and they're available on YouTube. And you can easily get there by going to the website and clicking on the link. Here's just some images from past conferences back when we were meeting in person and going all around the world. Hopefully we'll be doing that again one day soon. Probably not 2022, but we're crossing our fingers for 2023. If you haven't joined us yet, it's very easy to join. You can just go to the website and click membership and become a WARP member. We'd love to have you. All right, so today our panel is about Indigenous museums and practices. So, and we're going for this to Phoenix, Arizona, Juneau, Alaska, and then also Arizona State Museum. And we'll start off with a presentation by Velma Key Craig, who's a curator at the Heard Museum in Phoenix. She's a textile artist. She writes poetry and short screenplays and is also a teaching artist. And she'll be speaking about a number of exhibitions of native textiles which she has created for the Heard Museum.
Okay. Yeah, hey everybody. She Velma Key Craig Ineshia, Nasht Ejatabahanshle, Torich Idi Basas Chin, Lizatlana Dasha Chedo, Kenya Ani Dashinale. My name is Velma Key Craig. I'm assistant curator at the Heard Museum. I am Zuni Edgewater, born for bitter water. My maternal grandparents are many goats, and my paternal grandparents are towering house. I have dogs in my room, so you might hear some dog snoring. That's what that sound is, if you can hear it. But yes, I am going to go ahead and talk to you. So I've been at the Heard Museum for 4 years. I started out in my first 3 years as an Andrew W. Mellon Fellow. I was interested in the position because the description for the fellowship said that the fellows would work with Navajo textiles. And as a weaver and a person who teaches Navajo weaving, I was very interested in being able to spend as much time as I could with Navajo textiles. Let's see. You guys can probably see this bar here with, anyways, it's not letting me do much. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So yes, I was intrigued by this opportunity to work closely with Navajo textiles. So I applied for the fellowship. I was a fellow for 3 years. And then at the end of that 3-year term, they hired me on as assistant curator. So I've been able to do a number of things that, I don't know, they've just been very exciting at my time there at the Heard Museum. This first textile exhibition we co-curated back in 2019. It was super amazing because we got to focus on transitional era textiles, so textiles that were woven between 1860 and 1910. And as the name suggests, the exhibition was super, super colorful. This is the view that you would have had if you went into the exhibition from the entrance. We had this amazing idea for a wedgeweave wall. It wasn't supposed to be a wedgeweave wall. We wanted to exhibit these textiles hanging away from the wall in just this wild configuration. But wedge weaves, if you're familiar with them, they are textiles woven where the weft is at an angle. So it basically causes this warp distortion. So as you can imagine, trying to hang them away from the wall, they were even more wobbly than they are here, sort of laying against the wall, but it still looks amazing. So this textile here in the center that is, you know, pulled away from the wall, this is sort of what we wanted to do with that whole room of wedge weaves. Here's just another view of another gallery, section of the gallery. But one of the things, you know, as a Navajo weaver, I get a lot of questions, or I get a lot of people assuming, wanting to know if Navajo weaving is a dying art, which, you know, we wanted to, and, you know, in presenting or in seeing ourselves in museums, I think one of the things that I always feel is, or questions that we come across quite often, are people just kind of assume that Native people still aren't practicing their cultures, or Native people still aren't around in the area. So we needed to have a section called Still Rioting, in which we presented contemporary weavers that were breaking boundaries. So here we have an example of 3 textiles in that section. One woven by Mary Lou Schultz, which is just playing with the wedge weave idea even further, and creating a 3-dimensional distortion of the warp as opposed to a 2-dimensional distortion of the warp. The second one here in the middle is mine. The QR code reads, or was woven from a foreclosed home sign back in 2013. And then we have Palette of Cochineal by D.Y. Begay. Here's examples from Lola Cody. This purple one on the left side is woven by Lola Cody, who is the mother of Melissa Cody. This textile in the center is woven by Melissa Cody. And then on the right here, we have an example from Venancio Aragon called Prism of Emotions, woven in 2019. So other things that we wanted to incorporate into the exhibition were Navajo words. So on our label text, I don't have an example of that. We had included the Navajo names for the different types of textiles within the exhibition. Out here in front of the gallery itself, we found a translation, or we searched around for a translation of the title Color Riot. And what we came up with was Nidash, I'm probably saying that wrong, Desdon. So basically that means the colors or the creations exploded. And that was the closest translation that we could come up with that we liked for Color Riot. So that was super exciting. The next exhibition we did together, this was with, this one happened just recently when I became assistant curator. And at this time, part of my job as assistant curator is to oversee the 3 Andrew W. Mellon Fellows. So with them as co-curators, we finished up All at Once, which all of the textiles in this exhibition were donated by the Dalrymples. They're from the Bay Area. So the difference between the textiles here and the textiles in Colorado are these are woven more contemporary, so closer to recent times. And all of the weavers or the textiles exhibited are regional styles, but there is experimentation within the style. So we thought it would be called, there's just a super diverse range of textiles exhibited. Here we have at the entrance or outside the entrance, something written up by the, or for the collectors, about the collectors, their story. You can see here the Andrew W. Mellon Fellows that helped with this exhibition. Their bios and their photos are here at the entrance as well. And then we have a label describing the exhibition. what we really were really fortunate to have is photos of the weavers who wove the textiles came in with this donation. So we created this montage at the entrance to show all of the weavers whose photos came through with the exhibition. I mean, came through with the objects that in the donation. This is just a sample of a wall. Here we have the Laughing family clustered together here on the left-hand side. Mona Laughing is the mother, the matriarch of the family. And here, what I really liked about this sample is she'd been weaving sampler textiles for many, many years. She let us know, but got bored with this sort of grid format. So then in her next sampler started playing around with this asymmetrical format. So I thought that was really cool to just show, you know, that sort of need to continue on with, you know, developing design styles and breaking boundaries. This was just a great example of, you know, someone doing that. And then Charlene and Mona Laughing's pictorials here were just really cool. They're very similar, but, you know, they're and different from their mothers displayed here as well. And we have two pictorials. I love pictorials. What was great as well about this collection is we were able to reach out to a lot of the weavers, which, as you can imagine, we weren't able to do with Color Riot. So we got a lot of personal statements from the artists who created these textiles, and we were able to incorporate them into label text. We have an example. This is Mary Lou Schultz, and then we have Linda Teller Pete's textile here, and her sister Barbara Teller Ornellis's textile up at the top here. And then we have examples of pieces from the Nez family. So this whole area on the right side of the screen is a family. The matriarch, Grace Nez, her textile is the one on this wall, the smaller wall. There's just another gallery view. Toward the Morning Sun is the most recent exhibition. It's the one it's still up actually at the Heard Museum. This is another donation donated by Jean-Paul and Rebecca Ballette, who have written several publications on ceremonial themed textiles. So that's what this exhibition was about. It's running from, let's see, what did that say? November to February. And the reason why it's up so for such a small amount of time is because we wanted to honor the cultural protocols. A lot of these textiles have figures in them coming from origin stories or ceremonies. So we wanted to make sure that, you know, they were being displayed during the culturally appropriate time to talk about these themes, which is winter time. Here, what we were able to do is you can see examples of, so these textiles were woven by two sisters, Yanapa and Lenepa. Yanapa was the younger sister, and the three textiles on the left on the screen are Arrow People textiles. So these are figures that came from sand paintings. They did a little bit of alteration of the design because they didn't want to depict the figure accurately as it is in a sand painting. And then this is not an arrow painting on the right-hand side, but it is woven by Lenepa. But in literature or in, you know, older renditions of the spelling of Yanapa and Lenepa, you can see in the parentheses down at the bottom, they're just very like phonetic and, you know, so we were able to get a more accurate spelling of both of those names using characters in the Navajo alphabet. And so we're honoring, or we're incorporating the accent marks, the glottal stops, you know, that type of thing. Here's just a shot from the gallery. Another one. I mean, yes, I'll go ahead and save the rest of the time for everybody else, but here's my contact information if anybody has any questions and wants to reach out at any point. And I'm happy to answer any questions later on too, when the time for that is happening.
This is a new wrinkle. I guess it must be the new version of Zoom, but you need to get permission from the host today to unmute yourself. So,
And mute myself. I'm not able to mute myself right
oh,
now.
all right. Well, I have a question for you. One of our viewers would like to know if there's a catalog for the Color Riot exhibit. Someone else reported yes, there was, because she saw it in New Jersey. But if someone would like to purchase a catalog, how would they go about that, Velma?
Yeah, so the Color Riot exhibition does have a catalog, and the contributors were the co-curators, as well as Carol Ann McKay, who donated a large portion of, or loaned a large portion of the textiles exhibited. You can go to the herd.org website, which is the main website for the Herd Museum, and then go to the bookstore link and order it there. There's also a catalog coming out for Toward the Morning Sun. It hopefully will be published by the time the exhibition is closing, but there will be one for that exhibition as well.
Well, very good. They were all lovely, but I must say that Color Riot one really took my breath away. That was well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you to whoever saw it in Montclair.
A couple of people did. All right. So, from the Herd Museum, we're going to take a little trip to Alaska and hear from Lily Hope. She's a weaver, an artist, and mother, lives in Juneau, Alaska. And we'll talk about her weaving practice and also her experience curating exhibits of native textiles in the Northwest. So, Lily, hopefully you can unmute yourself and come on down.
Thanks for having me. If you hear little whisperings in the background, I do have 5 small children with me. Hopefully they will leave me alone for just a few minutes, but I'm happy to share with you today. Let me see if I can do this quickly and efficiency view slideshow. Yes? Okay. Wishkindain da'at yuchat duasak, yesh nachatsati, dakdain tan ayachat, late ka yadi ayachat. My Tlingit name is Wishkindain da'at. I am Raven Duckdain Tan from my matrilineal line. I am child of the white man. That's how we acknowledge our father's people. Goodness sheesh for having me. It's an honor and gratitude. It's in honor and in gratitude to my mother and mentor, Clarissa Rizal, that I'm here today. She was the last master chilkat weaver to have completed a 6-week apprenticeship with master weaver Jenny Clenot from Klukwan, Alaska. My main work is creating finger-twined chilkat ceremonial dancing robes. Each of these are 2,000 hours in the making. These robes originate here in Southeast Alaska and Western Canada. They document our history, our clan lineages, and our identities. At any point in the last 150 years, fewer than a dozen robe makers exist at one time. I am one of an estimated 7 artists who have woven a full-size chilkat dancing robe with the time and expertise to weave another. In addition to this work, I collaborate with museums. So I was asked by Mike Morawski of Portland Art Museum to curate a show on Northwest Coast Raven's Tail and chilkat weavings. Interwoven Radiance featured works from the Portland Art Museum collection, new acquisitions, this piece here, central, one of the last works by my mother, some loans from the late great Terry Rothkar, this DNA robe on the right side, the only robe that we know of in the last 100 years that was made all of mountain goat. And a large feature of this was the Weavers Across the Waters community robe. Hey, there's no picture of it. How sad. We're gonna have to look for it. It's visioned by my mother, completed by over 60 volunteer weavers in both Ravenstail and Chilkat. The show at the Portland Art Museum highlighted the generosity of spirit evident in weaver artists, the mastery of our ancestors, and the honoring of tradition while we continue to weave ceremonial dance regalia. We closed the event at the Portland Art Museum with a 3-hour presentation, very Indigenous. If you've ever been anywhere, we say it's going to be an hour long. It was 3 hours. We pulled 6 of the robes out of that exhibition and danced them, joined by other robes that came as far away from Yukon Territory and Alaska, with speeches and of course drumming and dancing. It took extra security, the whole team from the collections and conservation, and many financial backers to whom we are grateful. I will drop the link if you want to watch that later on. But yes, this closing of Interwoven Radiance showed that Portland Art Museum is one who is willing to elevate ceremony and Indigenous voices. In winter of 2019, right before the pandemic, I started meeting with the Alaska State Museum and a team of 5 other renowned weavers regarding a multiple decades in the visioning textiles exhibit. So it was like 30 years in the incubation. I was probably 8 when they started thinking about putting this together at the very small at the time Alaska State Museum. But an exhibition that would share the origins of Chilkat and Ravenstail weavings from their roots, the roots in spruce root basketry and cedar bark to curvilinear form line as we know Chilkat weaving today. The spirit wraps around you. Northwest Coast Textiles featured over 24 dancing ceremonial robes from ancestral and living weavers. Again, a melding from the Alaska State Museum collections, loans, and new acquisitions. The show also highlighted our nearly 2-year research project collaboration on Chilkat dye colors, an interwoven relationship between the local weaver community here in Alaska, the Alaska State Museum, and Portland State University, where local weavers contributed hand-dyed samples and raw materials and dye liquids, panel wording for this exhibition, but also sent all of those things down to Portland State University, and they are creating a database of what are our Chilkat blankets made of? What is the dye that's used? Because we have so few ethnographic records. It's been amazing. Again, I advocated for a grand exit of Spirit Wraps Around You, hopefully dancing out many of the robes here because they were used in ceremony already or in private collections and used often whenever we can dance them. But because of the pandemic, we agreed to film it for posterity. There were 18 of us masked. I'm going to see if I can do this smoothly. Join me for a moment over here. It's this one. Just wanted to share you a moment of this because, let's see. I'm going to jump forward so you get the energy. And then we tucked all of the robes to bed. Thank you for letting me share that. There were only 18 of us, present to watch these robes dance out. Only 6 of the 24 came off the wall. But all of us were emotional as we shut those doors on the vault. Whew, Iu Gaya Juan is what we say. These are our treasured ones. The Alaska State Museum, even with a staff of 5, a skeleton crew, agreed that the ceremony, the language, the dancing is an important acknowledgement for all of us. The artists and the cultural members who bring the weaving to life. Whew. I said I was gonna go back to my show here, sorry. I'm grateful for the work and the spirit that I've been able to share, for the collaborations with these institutions, but really the people at these institutions who recognize that our voices and our contributions are valuable, necessary, and powerful. It is important to know the spiritual protocols with all these works. So it's best to practice having Indigenous consultants help you from conception to opening. There is no comparison to viewing a hand-woven textile in the making or on a mannequin to experiencing many of them dancing to drums. If you get the chance, I hope you take that opportunity. Regardless of your nationality or cultural origins, you'll recognize that the spirit is alive in these works as they dance. Lastly, I encourage you to seek out the contemporary artists who are steeped in tradition to be included in your exhibitions, because as my sister Ursula Hudson says, innovation is traditional. Gunas Chish, thank you again for your time and attention. May you all continue to be well. And I will drop links in the chat in just a moment.
Lily, thank you so much. That was an amazing opportunity to see the robes danced. When you have a moment, you should read through some of the messages in the chats, because it was very moving for many of us to have that experience, and we appreciate you sharing it with us as part of your presentation today. It was unique. Very good. All right, so our third presenters today, and I want to mention to you that we will have time for questions after the 3 presentations or 4 presentations end. So I'd like you to think about what questions you may have for our speakers, and it can be for one person or for several. And when we get to that phase of our program today, write them in the chat. And if you want to write it now, just because you're afraid you won't keep it, that's okay. You can write it now. All right, so our next presentation is actually 2 presenters. We have Diane Dittmore from the Arizona State Museum and Porfirio Gutierrez, who's going to talk about an exhibition called Wrapped in Color, Legacies of the Mexican Serape.
Chanan, Kachinadi Naro, Kachinadi Nabe, Rabe Bazonedius Navalaste Yutu, Stisiniuta Yutu, Kayutu, Compandano Naji. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Please receive greeting from the ancestral nation, Zapotec people. It is quite an honor for me to be joining to this exhibition. Guerres, a Zapotec art. Maybe there's be a little bit noise background here. We're kind of just working. I have some friends visiting here, but the exhibition will explain a little bit more about the detail. What to share a little bit of my process of actually creating these pieces, but also my experience with the Arizona State Museum. And I will not be able to move forward with not thanking and appreciating the Arizona State Museum for finding the value of the indigenous people, such like myself, to be able to share our knowledge and wisdom, and to share a little bit about not only our experience as a weaver or textile artist, but also to hear the voice of the ancestors speaking through the textiles. I came to be aware of Saltillo Sarape, which is actually the serapis. The serapis is just actually a wearing blanket with the slit lid in the center, so that way it could go someone's head. And this was originated, what is now known as, or maybe if not originated, but maybe it was highly traded in the state of Saltillo in Mexico. And afterwards it would become to be known as Saltillo Sarape, that it ended up influencing throughout Mexico, including our culture here in Oaxaca, but also in Central America, as well as Southwest and so forth. I came to be aware of this style of weaving through my research of natural dyeing. And I did spend quite a bit time at the Smithsonian, at the American Indian Museum, looking at colors, looking at what might have been the elements that what the colors was made out of, because so much was already lost by the time I reestablished my studio. This is about 16 years ago. And that's after migrating in California, where I base right now, and where I also have a studio. Some things that really caught my attention when it comes to the serapis is not only the historical part of it, but also the fineness of these textiles and the designs and the movement that it's created by the colors itself. It would also have a specific space in the center that's either a diamond-like or a medallion-like, that to me, it brings some sort of a simplicity, but at the same time, very intricate. As you can see, one of the pieces here on the table, or actually both of these pieces are in the collection of the Arizona State Museum. And I just absolutely love how the colors or the shades of maybe 2 shades or 3 shades of blue create this movement, but also the dazzling eyes that it's been created through not only the design itself, but the role that the color plays. And of course, the influence that it had in Oaxaca. These two are a great example of the pieces that it's being created or was created here in Oaxaca. The one on your left, really common, it's really common serapis from Oaxaca. It's wool on wool. It is red, the predominant color. It's red, black, or just a background of white. The one at the left, we refer to that as bull. And it's the same thing here. And here you could clearly see how this dazzling movement of color that it's created through the designs and by just dots. That I was really interested in that. And of course, that has played a big role in my work, and that became part of my expression as a contemporary textiles. And for me, this is a way to honoring and pay homage to my ancestors and to the indigenous weavers that were, in most part, were slaves by the Spanish, because this type of weaving was actually associated by the elite Spanish, the landowners and horsemen. This is my most recent work. This is 6 of these pieces. It's in the Arizona State Museum exhibition. It's in the exhibit right now, and it's part of the wrapping. Again, here you can see this inspiration that I was talking about. This movement of these dots and the colors, and the play, how the colors play a big role on these designs. These medallion-like, and here it's sort of a very expression. In a lot of these sarapes, you'll see a band of different designs on each end, and they are a diamond or a medallion in the center. For one of these pieces, or the first piece you see here, is that I just wanted to honor these bands of the designs on the bottom, but also these element and these movement that I'm talking about on this medallion on the center. So there's no other bands of design on the end. This is the entire piece and what you're seeing here. And the piece behind it, you normally see these again, the medallion, which I believe it was influenced by the Moorish that came through Mexico by the Spanish. And but for me, it was not more anymore as a medallion. Like instead, it's these oval movement that to me it could also represent other deities, or that it's a Catholicism. And this body of work, I started to create a relationship with them. I call these fragments because of what it's left from since the colonization and how Indigenous people's life has been shaped through this syncretism and this blending of this tradition and how one influenced another, but also more than anything is the mastery of Indigenous weavers. It could clearly be seen here. And that is why this body of work is referred to as fragments. So this is another piece. And these are some of the elements that the bands that I was talking about that you see on each end of a weaving. But for me, it is much more of creating a conversation around, yes, these elements, but create movement with the colors, and specifically thinking about here, the corn, how corn, and especially here in Oaxaca, that we're still trying to preserve the indigenous corn, and how Monsanto has also played a role of wanting to deplete that. And for me, this is more of an oppression to the corn, and that's what it's been draping or falling. This is another work that you see. You can see the medallion here. You can see the diamond, the diamond in the center, but it's not anymore just in the center and other bands of designs and colors on each end. And instead it is the same elements that we refer to as the butterflies create this movement, but very, very abstract, and just to create these deeper and dive deeper, much more deeper into the dyeing aspect. As you can see here, not only to be able to create a color, but to be able to create a deep conversation and the dyeing vat. So that way it could create these movements that you see here on the piece. Here's another piece, which one of the very first one that I created. I've always been drawn by this space of a particular design, this movement of these designs, and again, it's just these very abstract of expressing them. This is another one. This particular I call this ofrenda, and again, this is a very common designs that you would see in these some of the maybe more contemporary sarapes, the influence that has been here, especially in the weaver community of Titlan. But I've been always drawn in this explosion of element, and one element, one space of the piece, this explosion of color and the intricacy of the design. This is also just to continue playing this conversation around the butterflies and the movement, but also the importance and the role that I continue repeating myself, that the color plays. And so much of this has been seen in the classic Saltillos sarapes, is the importance of color. They didn't use tremendous amount of colors, but predominantly cochineal and indigo. Thank you so much. I really appreciate, again, the opportunity. Diane would fill in a little bit more details, but again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share.
Porfirio, one question before you leave. What kind of
Sure.
loom do you work on?
I work on threadle loom. It's also known as the Spanish loom, and that's what brought to us by the Spanish, along with wool.
Very good. And how many harnesses does it have?
It only has 2 harnesses, and it's a tapestry weaving technique. These pieces that I showed, they're up to 22 thread to an inch, which means the more threads you have to an inch in the compact the pieces are. So this is this type of work has moved beyond that, what you might have known as rugs here in Oaxaca.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, so our last speaker today is Diane Ditmore, and you've worked together on an exhibit that's she's curated at the Arizona State Museum. Do you want to tell us a little more about it?
Yes, welcome everybody, and thank you, Porfirio. You will immediately see in my picture within our exhibit, we actually have one of Porfirio's looms, and I'll be having other pictures of that. So that will help you understand a little bit more about the kind of loom that he has. And we thank Porfirio for bringing the loom all the way from California to be included in our exhibit. So the Arizona State Museum is located at the University of Arizona campus in Tucson. According to our land acknowledgement, we respectfully acknowledge the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of Indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the Tohono O'odham and Passamaquoddy. Committed to diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and Indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service. And ASM is a major university asset in supporting of this striving. For this brief talk, I will focus on three aspects of Native participation and perspectives in recent textile exhibits and programs: co-curation, acknowledgement, and public presentations. I'll point out our successes as well as some of our challenges. Okay, I'm having a little bit of a challenge trying to figure out how to advance. But yes, okay. So let me get back to there. So this is, you can see the exhibit, and you can see that loom a little bit better. And also that Porfirio's story is front and center in this exhibit. It was our great pleasure to work with Porfirio along with Andrew Higgins and the rest of the exhibit team headed by our exhibit director, Lisa Falk. And I don't know why this is not moving forward. This was not our first time with Porfirio. This is not our first time collaborating with Native curators. A 2004 exhibit, Navajo Weaving at the Arizona State Museum, 19th century blankets, 20th century rugs, and 21st century views, was a collaboration between curator Ann Headland and the Ornelas family of Tucson. This exhibit also featured the Rimmer collection of contemporary Navajo weavings, which is now at the Heard Museum. As a quick note, Sierra Ornelas, who is at top center in this exhibit, in this picture, is now a major television producer, most recently heading up story development for the smash hit Rutherford Falls. And I highly recommend this particular show to you all. So in providing a backdrop for Porfirio's story, we started out by acknowledging the native roots of the Saltillo textile tradition. Certainly, as he pointed out, there was introduction of a new kind of loom and of course sheep's wool, but the traditions go way back before the Spanish came to Mexico. And here we have a textile fragment almost 1,000 years old, showing a diamond design at center, diamond designs in Mitla, an archaeological site in Oaxaca that has served as inspiration for a long time for Zapotec weaving. And then on the right, from the codices, a photo drawing of an Aztec garment, or tilma, that was one of the precursors of this wearing blanket. We were providing examples of weavings from other regional traditions that demonstrate the influence of serapes, and this included Diné or Navajo weavings, both old and new.
Diane? Diane, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Yes, please
We're
do.
not seeing your slides move forward.
This is, let me, I'm sorry. Okay, there, thank you. Now can you see them?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I have two monitors and it's a little bit of a challenge for me, but thank you for pointing that out. So here we have on the left, a classic period serape. And one of the features of it is woven longer than wide, which was one of the influences of Mexican textiles to Diné weaving. At the center, Kathy Marianito, this is a contemporary poncho with a great picture of her wearing it. And we wanted to show the continuation of the styles that had entered in to Navajo weaving with the introduction, with the exposure to the Saltillo weaving tradition. And on the right, Linda Teller Pete gave a talk about Saltillo influences in Navajo weaving within her family and elsewhere. Her sister Barbara also was very involved in programming. And so this was an area where we were able to enhance the native voices of the exhibit through special programming. In Wrapped in Color, we showcase textiles from the Northern Rio Grande Spanish American weaving tradition. And here we have at center a Chamayo blanket from the 1940s, a variation of that central diamond that came from Saltillo. And on the upper right, Erwin Trujillo, who with his wife, Lisa, are fantastic contemporary weavers in this Spanish American tradition. And they also were able to do a Zoom presentation, which gave the fascinating history of this multi-generational weaving tradition in northern New Mexico. And at the lower right, their books and the Centinela Weavers of Chamayo, which I highly recommend. It's a great story, as well as fantastic photographs of the Trujillo contemporary weavings. In addition, we incorporated examples of weavings from northern Mexico, Tarahumara or Rarámuri and Maya weaving. And so here we have, there's a photograph showing the horizontal loom a little bit off the ground and a Maya weaver. You can see a continuous warp type of situation, but horizontal instead of vertical. And on the right, an example of a Maya weaving from around 1920 with all hand spun wool and indigo dyed along with the natural sheep colors. And a similar kind of loom, but more close to the ground. Here's a Rarámuri weaver in Chihuahua. And then on the right, a blanket that has the diamond, the serrated diamond patterns with this particular weaving has both natural and synthetic dyes. So I hope many of you will be able to come to Tucson. It's supposed to be about 70 today, just saying, and to see our exhibit. But if you aren't able, I think Darlene, and thanks to Darlene Lizarraga at ASM for providing links in the chat for all of the different programs that I mentioned, but we have an exhibit booklet and we may be actually printing more copies. You'd already run out all of the original copies, but we also are in the process of creating an online version of this exhibit, which should be available shortly. And thank you very much for including us in your talk today.
Thank you, Diane. This is fabulous. I'm going to ask all of our speakers to put their videos back on and unmute yourself if you can. And we probably want to go off of the speaker view.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could stop sharing. That's good. Go back maybe to your standard view. I'm trying to do that gallery. There's everybody's smiling face. There were a couple of questions for you, Diane, that I want to kind of cover before we take more general questions for the whole group. One was a question about what's the name of the Aztec precursor to a wearing blanket?
Tilma, Tilma, and it's the plural Tilmatli. And Porfirio could probably do a better job of actually pronouncing that correctly, but that was as close as I could get.
You're
Great,
fine. Yeah, that's it.
Not too bad. Thanks.
Close enough. Okay. Also, there were some Zoom talks that you mentioned. Are those going to be available to view online, or do you have to go to the museum to see them?
No, the Zoom talks, I think Darlene Lizarraga has posted links to all of those talks in the chat box.
Very good.
Yes, we with permission, we end up recording all of the talks that we host here at ASM.
Uh-huh. All right. The chat is very active today. People have a lot of things to say, and there's a lot of tips in there. So Kelsey will go through the chat and include some of these in the follow-up email that everybody who's here today will receive. So don't feel like you have to really fast scribble things down before it goes, because we'll make sure you get all the information. Okay, so what do we have in the way of questions this morning? I guess I'll put out sort of a general one. And in this time of pandemic and isolation, I think it's fabulous that the artists and the museums have continued to mount exciting exhibits, and that we've been able to find ways to share them electronically. But I want to ask you, each of the presenters, if you would talk for a minute about the challenges presented to you as an artist for working in these times, and any tips that you might give to others who are on the program today. And Lily, do you want to start?
Oh, I guess so. Challenges working in these times. Social distancing is a challenge. I used to teach 8 classes a year, and so I knew that my income was going to be slashed if I didn't do something drastic. So I moved all of my teaching online, because so much of my work, half of my work is creating ceremonial regalia, and the other half is making sure that someone takes my place when I leave, because there are so few of us, right? So I now have over 30 students with me online on Patreon. I teach 4 classes or 4 projects to them each year. And every single Sunday we Zoom for 3 hours and we weave together online. So I have students from Yukon Territory to Manitoba, Quebec, Maryland, Nebraska, Colorado, all across the US Northern Hemisphere. Don't have any south of the border yet, but someday. But that's been the challenge for me, is human connection. So much of our work is about that connection. So I think I've figured out how to keep it, even though we have to Zoom on Sundays instead, which also means I don't have to fly to 8 different locations to teach classes. It's great.
That is great. There's always a silver lining, huh? Velma, what would you share with us?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm also a weaver and I do teach weaving classes as well. And the biggest hurdle for me in that respect was moving classes online. Before the pandemic and before we have had to do this virtual programming as much as we do now, I never would have dreamed that weaving would be possible to teach online. I always felt like I had to be present and had to feel and see, what was happening in real time, like in real space. And it's just amazing. I've been able to connect with people who are across the country and have not been able to learn weaving, because, they've not been home in decades, as well as people in the middle of the reservation who may have spotty internet, but for some reason or other haven't been able to learn as well because of their remoteness. So that's been the challenge there. As an artist, yeah, I mean, markets stopped. I haven't really been able to shift my presence online as well as some other weavers that I've seen. So I'm, really just in a lull there as far as my own personal. And then I came into my assistant curator position right at, when the pandemic was, about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and just have not really, for that full year, being new to this position and having all of these brand new responsibilities, just not knowing how to really do them, or not really knowing how that would work in a normal time. Like, that was really difficult. But I think connecting virtually, though it's a challenge and though it's not been ideal, like it's created opportunities in different ways as well.
Thank you. Porfirio, I think you may have moved during the pandemic. I'm trying to remember. Is that true? How has this affected your work?
Definitely, just like all the things that the colleagues here has already talked about. I think the challenge is it's for me much bigger than that. I think these online selling and doing things hasn't exhausted for me. And I can see the commercialism, especially in Oaxaca, the cheaper and faster repetitive things are becoming even more predominant because it's easier to sell. I think for me, focus so much on a natural dye, focus so much on the genuinity and the voice of the ancestor and the knowledge that nestle within every work I create here in the studio. It's been a little bit more, it's been challenged for people to continue to understand. And to answer your direct question, Judi, I have not moved. For many of you know that does know my work. I moved to California in Ventura, where I now live, about 25 years ago. And what happened, what's the new thing that's happening is I over the pandemic and the blessing of the pandemic, I have a studio now in California involving my kids. I have two young boys. My wife is Mexican-American, but they were never exposed to my work because I was always working here at the studio in Oaxaca. So I have a studio there. I continue to work. And that beyond a difficulty, I think that has definitely opened up a huge opportunity to be able to ask deeper questions. As Indigenous, a native of the Americas, what is migration means in that context? And when people ask me, they say, well, it's not authentic anymore because you live in the United States. In California, out of all the places, it's so modern. I don't think you'll find ways to get there. Or I remember one of the questions was, I want to buy one of your weavings, but does it still have the tradition, the family? Does it still have those earpieces? Because you now open a studio in California. And we often forget that our head is our house, that us as Indigenous people, we have nothing to do with borders. Borders came to be in between us. We have nothing to do with that. And we are Indigenous people of the Americas. We are in the same continent. All I did is I moved few blocks. I now live on the land of Chumash people, which has been our neighbors for thousands of years. And tradition runs through the people. It's within us. The knowledge runs through us. And so much of my work, it's driven by the land and nature. Much of the plant that I use here in Oaxaca also grows there wildly. And if the plants are immigrants, yes, I am also an immigrant. If not, they are native of that land. So if they grow there, that means my work is still live there as well. So that has been not so much of a challenge, I guess you could say that, but has brought an opportunity to create a much deeper conversation. And just like this, right? To be able to open up the perspective of us as humanity, because it still happens here in the community where someone says, were you harvesting in Ventura? Does Carrizo grow there? Does Yashi grow there? Because we have these notional borders. So I think that has been an interesting conversation. And again, thank you.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank all of our presenters today for being with us, for sharing your creative work, your passions. It's been very stimulating for me to see all of these things. I just wish there was a way to transport myself there in person and see the exhibits that are up now. But I see we have other opportunities. Lily has posted in the chat some exhibits that she'll be in the future, and we'll capture that and send it out to all of you. This has really been a treat. And I think I'll close by quoting Loretta Crippen, who's one of our viewers today, who says, "This is the most emotional event I've attended." And she loves having the panel. You all were very successful in expressing the values and the emotion behind your work, as well as sharing beautiful things with us. So thanks on behalf of Warp for everyone. We'll have another panel next month, and Kelsey, will you tell us a quick preview of what that's going to be?
Sure. Next month, we will have a panel of those who specialize in churro sheep breeding in the American Southwest. So, and I just would like to say thank you to our panelists today for sharing this incredibly valuable experiences and your valuable time with us. And thank you to everyone who took time to be with us today.
All right. Thank you, and we'll see you next month. It's been wonderful.